I didn't wake up to balloons, or flowers, or the sound of someone whispering, "You made it." There was no celebration, no warm hands, just the rhythmic beeping of machines, and a nurse who looked at me like I was a puzzle missing half its pieces. My mouth was dry, my limbs didn't move right. Everything ached in a way that didn't feel human. But even through the haze, the first word out of my mouth was barely a whisper. "Lena?" The nurse paused. Just a beat, but it was long enough to feel it. That tiny shift in the air that says, "You're not going to like the answer." She didn't respond right away, just offered a glass of water and said, "Let's get you stabilized first." But I wasn't asking about vitals. I wasn't asking about me. I was asking about my daughter. I tried to sit up. Tubes tugged against my skin. Pain screamed through every nerve. But I needed answers. I needed to know why no one had said her name yet. That's when I noticed the calendar on the wall. I'd gone to sleep in April. It was now March, the next year, 11 months. And no one, not the nurse, not the doctor, not even the social worker who showed up an hour later, could look me in the eye when I asked where she was. They gave me phrases like temporary arrangements and pending guardianship. They talked around the truth, until finally, one of them said it straight. "Your daughter is in the custody of your friend, Melissa." Friend. That word hit harder than the coma. Because Melissa wasn't just a friend. She was family, the godmother, the one I trusted with everything if something ever happened. And apparently, something did. While I was unconscious, my life had been signed away, my home sold, my rights stripped, and the person who took it all was the one who once promised to protect it, before the machines, before the silence, before the lies. I had a life that was small, but real, real enough to feel full. It was just the two of us, me, and a little girl with sleepy eyes, chipped nail polish, and a laugh that sounded like sunlight. Our morning started with cereal spilled on the floor and the same Taylor Swift song on repeat. She used to dance while brushing her teeth, arms flailing, foam everywhere, a tiny tornado in frog pajamas. I'd stand in the doorway, pretending to be annoyed, but secretly, I lived for it. The house wasn't much. One story, old wiring, a heater that wheezed louder than it warmed. But it was ours. Every corner held a memory. A blanket fort in the living room, stickers on the fridge that never came off, a height chart drawn in Sharpie by the back door, crooked and uneven, just like our journey. I had walked away from a high-paying job in tech to raise her, left the all-nighters and boardrooms behind. People said I was crazy. I said I was choosing peace. And I did. Every day, every diaper, every scraped knee, and bedtime book, I chose peace. And then there was Melissa, the friend, the helper, the one who brought wine on hard nights and helped assemble the IKEA crib that made us both cry. She never missed a birthday. She called herself Auntie Mel. She said we were her girls. Back then, I thought she was an anchor. I never saw the envy behind her compliments, never caught the way her smile faltered when my daughter ran into my arms first. Because when you're happy, really happy, you don't see the cracks. You don't question the people clapping the loudest. And you never think, this person might be rehearsing for the day they'll take it all away. But now, looking back, I see everything. Every side glance, every little dig dressed up as concern. Every moment she made me feel like I couldn't do it alone, while secretly planning to prove that I couldn't. It was raining that morning. Not the dramatic, movie-style downpour, just a gray, steady drizzle. Seattle's kind of rain, the kind that never really stops, but somehow still feels gentle. She was wearing her yellow rain boots, the ones with the little frogs on them. We'd argued about her coat because she wanted to wear the sparkly one, not the warm one. I let her win, like I always did. We laughed all the way to the car. I remember buckling her in, turning to give her one last kiss before pulling away from the curb. You be good, okay? Only if you bring me gummies after. I promised. Of course I did. That was the last thing I ever said to her. And the last time she saw me whole. I never made it to the store. Halfway through the light at Main and 44th, a delivery van, late, reckless, and in the wrong lane, blew through a red light and hit me driver's side, full force. They say I was unconscious before the paramedics even arrived, that my body took the brunt, that I was lucky to survive. But let me tell you something. Waking up 11 months later in a hospital bed with no memory of the impact, that doesn't feel like surviving. It feels like erasure. Because time didn't just stop for me. It kept moving, without my permission. While I slept, birthdays passed. Teeth were lost. School plays happened. I missed it all. And while I was tethered to machines, someone else was making decisions on my behalf. Quietly, legally, irreversibly. No one expected me to come back. And so, no one planned for what would happen if I did. They'd already started rewriting the story without me. And when I finally opened my eyes, I wasn't returning to my life. I was waking up in someone else's version of it. You know what no one tells you? How easy it is to steal someone's life when that person can't speak. While I lay unconscious, stitched together by machines and hope, the woman I trusted most didn't visit every day out of love. She came with a clipboard. She came with a plan. See, I'd listed her years ago, just a formality, really, as my emergency contact. She was the godmother, after all. I thought I was being responsible. Back then, we laughed about it over wine. But now, that paper trail became her permission slip. She filed for temporary guardianship within 2 weeks of the accident. Told the court I had no immediate family nearby. Claimed I hadn't left clear directives, that the prognosis was grim. She called herself a stabilizing presence in the child's life. And she was granted full access to my finances, to my medical records, to my daughter. No one asked questions. The system rarely does if you show up looking organized and sound reasonable. She spoke like a caretaker, but she moved like a conqueror. Within a month, she had closed out 2 of my bank accounts, claimed she needed the funds to cover medical costs, even though insurance covered most of it. Then she filed paperwork to list my home on the market. Not rent, sell. She called it a necessary liquidation of assets. But that home was almost paid off. I'd spent years grinding away at that mortgage, penny by penny, so Lena would always have a place to call hers. Turns out, the buyer was no stranger. It was a shell company, quietly tied to her boyfriend. A neat little transaction between 2 people who never had to explain themselves. She didn't just take over. She replaced me, on paper, in court, in every way that matters to a legal system built on assumptions. And the cruelest part, she did it smiling, like she was doing me a favor. I always thought home was something you couldn't lose if you loved it enough. I was wrong. While I lay in a hospital bed with wires running into my veins, the place where I rocked my baby to sleep, was listed online as charming, recently updated, move-in ready. I found out later, much later, that she staged the whole thing like a responsible adult, just doing what was necessary. She hired a realtor, cleaned out the garage, even left a bowl of lemons on the kitchen counter for the open house. Lemons. Meanwhile, I was in a medically induced fog, unaware that strangers were walking through my living room. Stepping over the creaky floorboard I never got around to fixing, complimenting the natural light in my daughter's old bedroom. And when I finally saw the listing, I couldn't breathe. The description said, "Perfect for a young family," as if I hadn't already built one there. What gutted me most was the reason. She didn't sell the house to cover expenses. My insurance had been paying. She knew that. She even had access to the paperwork. But she spun a story, told the court she needed liquidity, that she was protecting the child's future stability. What she didn't say? The buyer was a limited liability company, and that LLC was registered under her boyfriend's name. They flipped my house, painted it white and gray, ripped out the lavender bush by the mailbox, and replaced it with gravel, then resold it for a six-figure profit. And I was still unconscious, still dreaming about bedtime stories and warm toast, still holding on to a version of life that no longer existed. When I came to, I asked the hospital where my bills were being sent. The woman at the front desk looked at me like I was speaking a different language. "Your address was updated months ago." She showed me the form, signed, dated, approved, not by me. I realized then that home isn't a place. It's a target, and I'd left mine wide open. The human body can survive a lot. Broken bones, blood loss, blunt trauma. But nothing prepared me for the pain of waking up and realizing no one would tell me where my daughter was. Not directly, not honestly. The nurses smiled too much. The social worker blinked too slowly. There was this hum in the air, like a room just after someone's told a lie, and everyone's waiting for it to settle. I asked again and again, "Where's my child? Who has her? What's her address? Is she okay?" They kept saying things like, "She's safe," and "she's being cared for." But those are the kinds of words people use when they don't want you asking more. Finally, after days of deflection, someone said the name out loud. Not a family member, not a relative. Her, the woman who'd once sworn to be there if anything ever happened. My voice cracked. My stomach turned. I asked for a phone. I called. She answered, cheerfully, like she'd just won a raffle. "Oh my God, you're awake. This is amazing." I didn't waste time. I asked for my daughter. I asked when I could speak to her, when I could see her, and the shift was instant. The sugar in her voice disappeared. She said, "It's complicated. She's settled now. You need to focus on your recovery." Settled? She talked like Lena was a piece of furniture, something she'd rearranged into her new life. I told her I wanted my daughter back, that I was alive, breathing, coherent, ready. She sighed. Not like someone sad, like someone inconvenienced. "We'll figure something out soon," she said. "But let's not disrupt what she's gotten used to." Disrupt, that's the word they use when they want to erase you gently. Like pressing delete. With a smile. And in that moment, I knew. She wasn't planning to give her back, because she didn't think she had to. There's a moment when survival stops feeling like a victory. You're breathing. You're technically alive. But everything that made your life, your home, your child, your name, is gone. I left the hospital with a plastic bag full of other people's clothes, a bus pass, and a discharge summary that read like a stranger's obituary. I asked the nurse if she had a forwarding address on file for my daughter. She looked up, typed something, then said, "I'm sorry. You're not listed as the primary guardian." I just stood there. Because how do you argue with paperwork signed behind your back? How do you scream when the ink's already dry? The place I called home? Sold. My bank account? Closed. The will I'd carefully written with a lawyer years ago? Misplaced, they said. I checked into a women's shelter with trembling hands. A cot, a communal bathroom, a metal locker for the little I had left. The walls were thin. The air smelled like bleach and sadness. Everyone there had a story, but I couldn't even find the words for mine yet. I spent my days dialing legal aid hotlines, waiting on hold, trying to piece together a trail no one wanted me to follow. Every person I spoke to gave me the same tone, the same look, the same cold sympathy that says, "You've already lost. You just don't know how to let go." One paralegal told me bluntly, "She filed for full guardianship. It's been finalized. You weren't there to contest it." I wanted to scream. I was in a coma. But even that felt like an excuse in a world where time doesn't wait for healing. The hardest part wasn't that she'd taken my daughter. It was that the system had let her. And now, I wasn't just trying to fight back. I was trying to prove I even existed. Sometimes, the first step out of the darkness isn't justice, it's being heard. I was at a community center one afternoon, just trying to stay warm, charge my phone, pretend I was still a part of the world. They were hosting a local podcast there. Something small, fold-out table, scratchy mic, a volunteer passing out lukewarm coffee and clipboards. The flyer said, "We want to hear your story." And for whatever reason, I sat down. I told them everything. My voice shook, my hands trembled, but I told the truth about the coma, about the betrayal, about how I woke up to find that my daughter was gone. My home was sold, and no one, not one single person, had fought for me. It wasn't polished, it wasn't pretty, but it was real. The episode went live a week later. I figured no one would hear it. I was wrong. The email came 3 days after it aired. Subject line, "I think I know what she did." At first, I thought it was spam, but then I read the name. Someone who had worked at the law office that filed the guardianship papers. She said she'd left the firm not long after. Said things about my case had never sat right. She remembered inconsistencies. A notarized form with a stamp that didn't match the office's records. A rush order on the guardianship, pushed through in 2 days. Names on signatures that didn't belong where they were. She didn't have everything, but she had enough. Enough to reopen a question I thought was closed. Enough to make me believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't over. That podcast didn't hand me justice on a silver platter, but it cracked open a door. It reminded me I wasn't crazy. I wasn't invisible. I was erased. And now, I was clawing my way back into the story. The courtroom wasn't what I imagined. No drama, no gasps, no grand reveal where someone stands up and yells, "Objection," like in the movies. Just dull carpet, fluorescent lights, a judge who looked like she'd heard it all before, and me, standing there in borrowed shoes, clutching a folder full of proof, praying that facts still meant something in a place like this. Across the aisle, she sat with her lawyer. Designer blazer, neutral lipstick, calm as stone. She smiled at me, not a warm smile, not even a fake one. It was the kind of smile you wear when you're already sure you've won. I presented everything I had: records, discrepancies in the guardianship filing, screenshots of bank transfers, and a written statement from the legal assistant who'd emailed me after the podcast. I told the truth, clearly, firmly, from the heart, and for a moment, I saw something flicker in the judge's eyes, something that almost looked like concern. But then came her turn. Her voice was soft, practiced. She said she'd stepped in when no one else would, that she'd provided love and stability, that she'd never wanted this outcome, but did what was necessary for the sake of the child. She used the phrase, "in the child's best interest," like it was armor, and the judge nodded. In less than 15 minutes, it was over. Custody remained with her, permanently. The court ruled it would be too disruptive to remove the child from her current environment. Too disruptive, as if I were the chaos, as if I hadn't been the one torn away. I stood. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and as I walked out of that courtroom, I passed a small figure in the hallway. Tiny hands, familiar eyes, clutching a stuffed animal I hadn't seen since before the coma. She looked up. "Mommy?" It wasn't a question. It wasn't even for me. She ran to the woman who had taken my name, and I kept walking. Because the system had already decided who I was. And apparently, I wasn't her mother anymore. After the courtroom, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't collapse in the hallway like some poetic scene from a sad movie. I just walked out the doors, down the courthouse steps, into the kind of air that feels like it knows you've just been gutted but doesn't care. And I made a decision. If the law didn't want my truth, the world would hear it. I walked into a community co-working space that offered free internet access, sat down at a beat-up desktop with a monitor that flickered every few minutes, and I opened YouTube. No editing software, no ring light, no script, just me and a camera. I stared into the lens like I was staring into the eyes of everyone who'd called me crazy, dramatic, not fit. And I said, "Hi, my name is Rachel. I was in a coma for 11 months. When I woke up, my daughter was gone. My house was sold. My life had been reassigned without my consent. And the person who did it all was my best friend. No music, no fancy transitions, just facts. Painful, brutal, raw. And for the first time in almost a year, I felt something crack open. Not in me, but around me. The views didn't explode overnight, but they grew. One share turned into 100. 100 turned into 1,000. People started commenting. "This happened to my sister. My ex did this to me. You're not alone." I got emails from legal advocates, social workers, journalists. But the one that hit different came from a former client of hers. Said this wasn't the first time she'd manipulated vulnerable people for gain. Said they'd kept quiet out of fear, until now. The internet didn't give me justice, but it gave me volume. It gave me witnesses. It gave me leverage. And that was enough to make her nervous. I know because 2 days later, I got a cease and desist letter in my inbox, so I did the only thing I could do. I read it, out loud, in the next video. Because the truth, it doesn't need permission. It came in a pale pink envelope, no return address. Just my name, written in pencil. A little shaky. Letters backwards in that way only kids can get away with. I held it for a long time before opening it. Like part of me thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the moment everything turned around. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, folded twice, one corner torn, like it had been pulled too quickly from a notebook. And then I saw the handwriting. I didn't need a signature. I knew. She wrote about her new school, her favorite snack, a dog named Marshmallow she got for her birthday. She said she had her own room now, that she got to paint it light blue, like the sky. And then, there it was. Thank you for taking that long nap so Melissa could take care of me. I swear, my heart didn't just break. It caved in, because I realized something that hurt more than losing her. She hadn't lost me. She'd been taught to forget me. I read that line over and over until the words stopped looking like language and started looking like proof. Proof that love can be edited. She ended with a sentence I still can't read without tearing up. Maybe we can see each other again when I'm older. Melissa says that's okay if I want to. If. There was a drawing on the back, 3 stick figures, one tall, one medium, one small, all holding hands, a big yellow sun in the corner. I wasn't in it. I pressed that paper to my chest and sat there in silence for what felt like hours, letting it burn a hole where hope used to be. And I understood, maybe for the first time, that some hearts don't come back, not because they don't love you, but because someone else got to them first. I used to think starting over meant going back, reclaim the house, get the kid, wipe the slate clean, pretend none of it ever happened. But life doesn't come with an undo button, only a next. So that's what I chose. At first, it was just survival, couch surfing, volunteering at food banks to cover a warm meal, taking part-time gigs no one else wanted. But slowly, quietly, something shifted. I started talking, not just on YouTube, not just behind a screen, but in rooms full of women like me, women with stories that didn't make headlines, but should have, women who were told they were overreacting, too emotional, legally irrelevant. We swapped shame for truth, pain for purpose. I got certified as a peer advocate, took free legal literacy workshops at night, joined a nonprofit that helped mothers in custody disputes. I wasn't a lawyer. I wasn't anyone's hero. I was just someone who understood. And in a system that profits off silence, that was enough to make noise. Then one day, after a community panel, a law student came up to me. She had tears in her eyes. She said, "I saw your story in a lecture last semester. My professor used it as an example of how the system fails women. You don't look like someone who lost." I smiled, because I didn't, not in the ways that mattered anymore. I may have lost a house, a courtroom battle, a place at the dinner table of the little girl I once tucked in every night. But I found something I didn't even know I had. A voice that doesn't beg, a spine that doesn't bend, and a purpose that burns hotter than rage. I'm not the same woman I was before the accident. She was kind, software, trusting. I'm still kind. But now I know where kindness ends and self-respect begins. This version of me. She doesn't need permission. She writes her own ending, one chapter at a time. There's a park not far from where my house used to be. Sometimes I go there early, before the moms show up with strollers, before the dogs start barking, before the air gets filled with things I'm not part of anymore. There's a bench under an old maple tree, cracked wood, initials carved into the side, one armrest missing a bolt. It used to be our spot, hers and mine. Now, it's mine alone. I sit there and just watch. The way the morning light hits the swings. The slow shuffle of leaves under tiny shoes. It's beautiful, and it hurts. For a long time, I thought healing meant getting back what I lost, fighting hard enough, screaming loud enough, proving I deserved it. Like if I just did enough, life would give her back. The house, the bedtime stories, the routine. But healing, real healing, isn't about reversal. It's about release. Letting go of the picture you painted in your mind of how it was supposed to go, of the life that no longer fits, of the version of yourself that only existed in the presence of what you lost. That woman, the one who built a home, carried a child, loved unconditionally, she still lives inside me, but she's not all of me anymore. Now I'm something new, something formed in fire, sharpened by silence, humbled by injustice, and I've learned not all losses are meant to be fixed. Some are meant to be carried, like scars, not as shame, but as proof that I lived, that I loved, that I was here. Some people rebuild with bricks, I rebuilt with memory. And every time I sit on that bench, I don't wish for what was. I honor what survived. If you've made it this far, thank you. Not for watching, not even for listening, but for staying. Because stories like mine don't come with perfect endings. No sweeping courtroom win, no dramatic reunion, just truth. Heavy, flawed, unfinished, truth. And I know this wasn't easy to hear, but maybe you needed it. Maybe you know someone like me, or maybe you are someone like me. Maybe you've had everything taken without warning. Maybe you've been replaced in your own story. Maybe you've sat in silence, watching the people who hurt you be praised as heroes. If that's you, I see you. And you're not crazy. You're not weak. You're not overreacting. You're a person who deserved better, and still do. What happened to me? It shouldn't have been possible, but it was. And the only thing that made it real wasn't a courtroom. It was this, me, talking to you, saying it out loud, refusing to let it rot inside me, because silence is what they count on, that you'll be too ashamed, too broken, too tired to fight. But every time one of us speaks, really speaks, we make it harder for them to keep doing what they do in the dark. So I'm asking you, leave a comment, share this with someone who's doubting themselves. Save it for the day you forget how strong you are. Tell your story, even if your voice shakes, even if it doesn't have a clean ending yet. Truth doesn't have to be polished. It just has to be yours. My name is Rachel. They tried to erase me, but I came back louder. And this was my truth.